Hello and welcome to the Sustainability Skill Set Podcast, a show where we explore careers in sustainability and the skills you need to succeed. I'm glad you're here. If you are passionate about sustainability and hungry to learn, you're in the right place. I'm your host, DeMaso, a sustainability consultant and young sustainability professional learning right along with you. Today, we have Alex Nichols-Vinueza with us. Alex is the program manager of food loss and waste for the World Wildlife Fund. He collaborates with stakeholders including policymakers, industry leaders, public and private companies, and schools to promote sustainable food practices and reduce food waste. For example, he's recently led a coalition of environmental NGOs to develop a policy action plan for the US government on food waste. He's also supported the Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment, one of the largest public-private initiatives on the topic. His fluency in Spanish and international experience in Colombia and Central America enable him to work with a diverse range of people and organizations. His past experience in project management, partnership building, and sustainability consulting enable him to lead large groups to consensus and succeed in driving change. I learned a lot from this conversation, and I'm sure you will too. Let's bring in Alex. Hey, good morning, Alex. Thanks for joining.
Hey, good morning, Lou. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on. Could you start by just giving us an overview of your role with WWF?
Sure. So I'm a program manager here on our food loss and waste team at World Wildlife Fund here in the US. And we're part of our food and our freshwater team. So we're really focused on reducing and freezing the footprint of food. And so our role is to work with different sectors up and down the food supply chain, as well as K-12 schools on really trying to reduce the inefficiency that is food loss and waste and trying to do more with less, I could say.
Yeah, that's a big challenge that you guys are tackling, but it looks like you're doing really cool stuff with it. So what kinds of challenges are you focusing on specifically with food waste? What does food waste really mean, and what aspects of it are you focusing on?
So I would say that what's really nice about working on this issue is that it's a very non-controversial, when we talk about the range of environmental issues, you tell someone to stop eating meat or to, change their diet. That's really important, but it's a really hard thing to change. And I can attest to that just in my own house and my family. And so when you talk about food loss and waste, it can bring people together, both politically and then across both kind of the public and private sector realm. And so we are working at the farm level, which we've had the chance to work together on giving growers the tool to first understand and measure, what levels, what types of loss that they're seeing right now in their current production practices, and ways that they can commercialize and get further revenue from that current surplus as a way to obviously help them financially. But then also perhaps what we think about it from, again, the food and freshwater side is how can that help to reduce the pressures right now on current ecosystems, right? To hopefully release some of that pressure of overproduction, of conversion, of input use. And so, that's what we think about it from the production side. And then, all the way over to retail as things go from distribution to food manufacturing, to food service, to grocery stores. We're working at all those different segments as well for them to better understand, again, what are their food loss and waste hotspots? Like what is right now the reason that they have that, and how do you drive those inefficiencies out, both from a cost perspective and also to help them reach their different climate objectives. So, we have the good fortune of being able to work really holistically across that and try to bring people together as well, which is one of my favorite parts about the job is, there's all these silos. Our food supply chain is incredibly complex. Sometimes it's as simple as increasing communication, better data sharing, and bringing people together to try to look for a solution that you can't solve on your own in your individual silo.
Definitely. It sounds like you work across the supply chain, not only with growers, but the distributors and then the final retailers. How do you decide where to focus your attention at any given time?
A little bit is, I'm fortunate to work on a team, right? So I don't, by any means do this myself. And so, we have different leads for those areas. We work on a public-private partnership on the West Coast. And that's really been starting. We started with where we felt like we would have the ability to move the market in terms of, where is the leverage point across the food supply chain? And for better or worse, like the grocery retail sector is fairly concentrated in terms of market share with a smaller number of companies. Whereas if you go into food manufacturing, it's it's a very diverse and a very fragmented space. And so we started with grocery retailers just so that, if you can help them to first and foremost start to more regularly measure and then publicly report through this partnership where their food waste is, right? It starts to then allow or inform us to look at, well, what are the interventions we need to prioritize and work on with them to accelerate? And that should be pre-competitive. And what I mean by that is this isn't about, them sharing confidential information. This is really an issue that I think people can set aside their individual company goals on to say, we should be sharing best practices. We should be sharing learnings. And so we try to facilitate that. That's one of the things WWF is known for, and that I'm proud to be part of, is that convening power that they say and the ability to bring different stakeholders together. So we try to do that at the retail level. And then, again, it's a little bit opportunistic. It's about where is their interest and energy, because there's, we're just an NGO. We can't force anyone to do anything, but where does this align with some of their current objectives? And so think about a place like hospitality where, it started with maybe over the last 10 years, you've got companies that are putting out on your, the little paper thing that you put on your door that says, please don't clean my room, so that you can help to save water and do your part. I think that's an example where guests more and more are looking for ways to have a less impactful, visit or stay. And so we're trying to work with that industry, just given how public facing it is as well, and how many guests come through a convention center and how many guests come through a hotel. It's a way to really both educate consumers, but then meet that demand as well. At the same time, that helps the businesses reduce their costs. So that's another example where we just saw both a willingness because it aligned with their goals, and then just an overall trends as well. So 2 examples there.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that you mentioned bringing all the stakeholders together in a pre-competitive environment, and how it's not, they're not competing with each other, but they're working to solve larger goals. And that's really what sustainability is about a lot of times, whether it's on food waste or other topics as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's one of the things that I enjoy the most. And I think that WWF as an organization, I've been very pleasantly surprised to see that, having worked in the private sector before. I love that there is this pragmatism, and that, we're not going to be able to agree on everything, but let's find the things that we can agree on. Mm-hmm. And that goes with, peers as well. This is uncomfortable at first when you bring these competitors together. They'll tell us, right, this is the first time we're really doing this. This is going to be a tough sell internally. But once you kind of break the ice, and once you really see that there are such shared objectives, and there's really no reason not to be, working with one another on this, it's wonderful. So it's been one of the things I love most about the job.
Yeah. So we've just shifted into this topic, but I'd love to hear a little bit about what the benefits are for working for an NGO, and how that makes your mission easier as a food loss and waste practitioner.
Well, I'm not going to lie. I'm extremely lucky to work for World Wildlife Fund, just because it's very well known. And so when you tell people, when they say, where do you work, or where are you calling from, you say World Wildlife Fund, a lot of people will say that they, when they were younger, one of their parents gave them, a gift through one of our programs to, sponsor an animal, let's say. And so I think that there's an automatic, we're very well recognized. And so I think that helps with just having some trust to start from. One of the things I love, though, is that we are, a very rigorous science-based organization. And so, we're first and foremost about doing things that truly can have an impact, and that you think about things like the Science-Based Target Initiative, or some of the different standards that we've helped develop over the years, the Marine Stewardship Council, and the same with the Forest Stewardship. And so I think that I appreciate that we're always going to be grounded in the latest science, and that's what really drives us, is making sure that we are truly doing what's best for the planet, and both people and nature. But at the same time, again, there's that pragmatism. So we know that with a certain company, we're not going to agree on, let's say, everything, but we want to help them move things forward. And so we're really about trying to drive momentum, and try about, we're not going to solve everything, let's say, but we certainly feel like that there's going to be areas of common ground, and we look for that. Again, we try to convene different stakeholders and find that common ground to move things forward. And so I very much appreciate that about this particular NGO where I work, because there's people from a very wide range of backgrounds. There's a lot of folks like me that came from industry, or It didn't just come and, it wasn't just conservation all the way through. And there are plenty of people. We have amazing conservationists and scientists, but I like that we have that diversity of thought. And I think that lends itself to what we do well.
Definitely. It sounds like that diversity of thought and that trust that you have right from the start with partners that you work with is super important. And you focus on impact, really trying to have those science-based outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely.
You had mentioned that because you're an NGO, though, you can't force anyone to do anything. Are there any drawbacks from working from the position of an NGO in the market?
I mean, from, as an NGO too, there's a limited amount of influence that we have. I think that what we try not to do is make it just ourselves. I think that one thing, at least I've experienced on our team, is that, whether it's working on policy or it's working on some of these public-private initiatives, we really try to bring in as wide of a coalition as possible. So I think we recognize those limits that we have in terms of being able to influence. A lot of these things are voluntary, right? So like the public-private partnership, that's a voluntary initiative. There's no teeth behind it if something isn't met at times, right? That's one of the reasons why we are constantly working on policy as well, because you can do great work with wonderful different partners as more of a pilot or a demonstration project. But at the end of the day, we need to move the whole market. And some folks, no matter how compelling it is, no matter how much money they're going to save, they're focused on their day to day and, let's say running their business or running their organization. And so, it's not that they don't care. It's not that they don't think food loss and waste is an important issue, but they're still just not going to make time for it unless it's a requirement. So I think that's one of the things that, again, I appreciate about the way that we approach the work is like, let's get down at the ground level where the impact's happening. Let's hold up, a wide range of partners in the work that they're doing. And I know we've had the chance to do that together, and then try to connect that to larger policy change. So that's I'm saying one of the benefits again. I really appreciate that we play in those different spaces, both private sector and public.
Definitely. It sounds like one of the main ways you overcome the drawback of not having those teeth that you mentioned is just bringing together a wide coalition of perspectives and trying to get as many voices in the room as possible to really get cross collaboration going.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, you have to from a more personal standpoint too, when you work at an NGO, one of the drawbacks too is just that you're resource constrained. I mean, even some listeners might say you're WWF, you're one of the largest NGOs in the world. You're not resource constrained, but I can tell you personally, we are. I mean, you're still always fundraising. There's never enough time in the day. If you move from the private sector, right, you take a significant pay cut, and that's not why you're in the business, right? But there's challenges in just being able to go out and do everything that needs to get done. And so that's one of the challenges, is just being able to prioritize where you think you can have the most impact, where you can make the biggest shift in a market, let's say. And so I think that's just another, if we're talking to folks that are looking to get on the field, I mean, that's just it's a stone cold reality. But again, I love what I do, and that's a challenge. That being uncomfortable, I think, is a good thing. I don't like being so uncomfortable that I wake up in a panic, right? But I love that this job gets me outside of my comfort zone a lot, just to sort of push me to, push me into new challenges and to push me in ways that I might not otherwise have. So definitely another important point, I think.
And being resource constrained can sometimes produce the more creative solutions.
That's true. Yeah. And it happens. I hate to pivot into sports, but as a soccer player, I can say that too. I think that, from my experiences, when you play soccer, all across the world, some of the best players are the ones that have that drive and have that they've grown up playing in some of the toughest places. And so, not to say that's the same as working at WWF, but there's something about that, just being a little outside your comfort zone and having those different challenges that keeps you on your toes that I appreciate.
Absolutely. I like that. And even through your journey, you've had a huge impact. You helped lead a coalition of environmental NGOs to develop a policy action plan for Congress recently to reduce food loss and waste by 50% by 2030. Is that right?
Yeah, I was very fortunate to be part of that and to help manage that process. And there were so many amazing people that, were a part of that, really, really helped along the way to drive that forward and to develop those ideas. And so it was truly a coalition, and it was one of the first big projects that I was able to work on when I joined WWS. So it really was a kind of a reaffirmation of, this is the kind of work that I want to do. You had different NGOs, you had different teams internally. I hate to make it sound like super kumbaya, but it was sort of shocking how well people were able to collaborate. And I was very fortunate to be able to kind of help oversee a lot of that. And again, that's just kind of my personality. I would say is that I come from a very eclectic background. I think that one of the things that's helped me be able to now do these types of things is that I've just had to talk with all different kinds of people. I also have, I attribute this to my mom in a large part, just because my mom is a special ed teacher, and all the work that she did growing up and that I was around. She's an extremely empathetic person. She's a great listener. So she was a great model for me as well. And just being able to come in, really understand people, what they need, and then kind of be the person that looks for the common ground and keeps things moving forward. So I think that was all part of it.
Since we're talking about it, could you just give a brief background of some of the different types of people you've worked with over the years and how your history has enabled you to do that?
Yeah, you mean just from my professional background?
Yes, that's right.
So I'm from, just to take it real way back, since you and I have talked about this. So I come from northern Michigan. It's an ag community. It's a tourist, community. And so grew up in and around farms and, also just working those types of jobs where you're interacting with people from all over that are coming in and visiting your town. And so had a lot of jobs as, either a farmhand or like working in restaurants. And so, is that as simple as that might sound, I do think all of that stuff adds up. And so, from there, went on school, studied, business, Spanish, and then I ended up working in sustainability consulting at a large consulting firm at Deloitte, and was able to again see a whole host of different industries, different business environments. Wasn't something I knew I wanted to do long term. Didn't enjoy the work, the kind of the lifestyle with that, but really, really valuable. And went into to tech. Wanted to do something where I was really rooted in a community and not traveling all the time. And so Google had opened an office in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is where I went to school. And so, again, was able to really learn from a whole host of different people. At the time in tech, it was interesting because you had a lot of people like me who came from, like a liberal arts background or just a really like smorgasbord of different types of backgrounds. So it was a really eclectic and interesting environment. It was very fast paced. It was if you see a problem, jump in and solve it. And so it was a good fast paced environment in terms of learning and being able to get experience managing projects or, just kind of, instead of asking someone to do something you're waiting for it, just jumping in and doing it. So I appreciated that sort of initiative that had developed. And so, from there, I worked both in the US and in Latin America with that work. And that was really about building different partnerships. It was sales, it was partnerships, and so again, you're working across both like an industrial company, let's say, where that's selling widgets, and then you're working all the way to with politicians, let's say in Colombia or in Latin America. And so again, wide range of people. You'll hear that common thread a lot in our conversation today. And so I knew that wasn't something I wanted to do long term, but it was really beneficial in terms of its support for me to get exposure to different industries, meet lots of wonderful people that really smart people that I was able to glean things from. And then just for my personal career too, or my personal life, my wife was studying at the time and moving a lot. And so it was really beneficial. It was very flexible to support that. So, from the time my daughter was born, I knew it was time to make the pivot and get back to sustainability. I knew that's where I wanted to be. And that was really what kind of was the wake up call. Let's do this. So at that point I went back to school and I got a master's in environmental management at Duke's Nichols School of the Environment. And from there I was able to pivot over to WWS.
Yeah. all those experiences working in different industries, working across cultural barriers, sounds like they really developed your skill set of collaboration. And it relates to the approach that you described for WWF with bringing different stakeholders together and really being able to bridge those communication gaps.
Yeah, it's funny. And I can't remember when we've talked about this before, but I was very frustrated early in my career because I wanted to do sustainability work right off the bat. And when I started in consulting, it was the Great Recession. And so not a lot of companies were interested in sustainability. That was one of the first things to get cut, right? And so, I wanted to just jump in. I wanted to go direct to, and I didn't know exactly what within sustainability, but I knew I wanted to have some type of a social and environmental impact. I wanted to do something that was purpose-driven. And so it's funny how this brought me to where I am now, where the door was closed, right? I got to do a little bit, but the door was closed, and I took this kind of circuitous path where met a lot of different kinds of people, had a lot of different industry experience, and how that's now helped me to be able to do sustainability work, but hopefully more effectively.
It's a great parallel. I spoke with a friend who is working in energy policy in DC last week, and he described how he started off working. He knew he wanted to work on sustainability, but he started off working on topics that were somewhat unrelated, some water projects, things like that, but really just learning the legislative process. And the whole point for him at that point was just learning the skills and the related structures that you needed to understand to then work in sustainability. So it sounds like you did a similar thing where you picked up the skills over time, working jobs that were adjacent to what you were hoping to do, and then eventually narrowed in and got what you're working on now.
Yeah, I was forced to be patient, and it ended up, like everyone says, it ended up being a virtue and very helpful.
That's great. So the project that you worked on when you first joined WWF sounds really exciting. Could you describe a little bit more about how you supported that effort exactly, and what kinds of skills you used to accomplish that?
I was really just the kind of the orchestrator, in the sense where it was really about just, there was a need. We knew there was going to be a change in administration, and when these policy windows open and you have a chance to really advocate for an issue like this, it's just being, again, opportunistic and willing to just jump in. So that's kind of back to what I mentioned Google was like. It's not about overthinking it, analysis paralysis. It's about jumping in. And I was fortunate enough to, at Duke, have done a lot of policy writing, a lot of memo writing. And I worked with now Undersecretary Robert Bonney, who's at the USDA. He was a professor at the time. And so really good experience in both doing the research and the writing. And so, I just jumped in. I knew we had an agreement across some of the different NGOs that we were partnering with. Of, these are some of the central ideas. And so just getting things moving, giving something people can react to, and then to really kind of usher along, hey, can you, delegating out, can you help with this part? Or I have questions here. I think one skill to highlight to listeners that I would just confess is that, like, I'll never be the smartest person in the room, but I'm also totally unafraid to ask, the dumb question, quote unquote, that, just kind of confirms, clarifies, moves things along. So I think that also is a skill, as simple as that sounds, is one that I think, especially when you're working in so many different fields, you can't ever be an expert in all of them. And so,
absolutely
unafraid to just jump in. Not in a, I don't mean this in a chaotic way. It's just that, you just need to kind of be willing to get things moving and know that you're going to then have to get help and delegate out. So,
yeah. And that question that feels dumb is usually one that many people have in their heads, and
right.
Asking it just brings greater clarity and greater synchronization for the group.
Yeah. So I think it's certainly Duke helped me a lot on the actual technical side of it, but the other part of it, I think, is a little bit more of just those things that I picked up along the way and just have found that have served me as I've moved from different industries or changed jobs. You just have to be willing to kind of jump in and ask questions, and be willing, for lack of a better term, to sort of like roll up your sleeves and start working at it, and knowing that it's not going to be perfect. You have to, I can say back in this is such a trite thing, but I'll say it, this sort of idea of test, iterate, like it's very much a trope from software development and in technology. It's not, let's not wait till it's perfect and then have a big release. No. Let's like just get in there. Let's start. We're going to have to fix it every day. That's okay. But it's better to have that fast feedback loop than it is, in my opinion, to have the big reveal and then realize you were off the mark or you upset someone because you forgot something. So
I love how you're taking experience in tech, which many would feel is unrelated to sustainability, and showing the connection, because it really is. It really develops those skills. And would you say that the ability to jump in and learn quickly and pick up information and consolidate information quickly is an important aspect of your role?
I think one thing I want to make sure I'm clear on is that, you have to do, this is now like a bad expression to say in our society, but like you have to do your research. You have to like go in and, I mean, before you come in, it's with informed questions, right? So I want to be respectful of people's time, but yes, it's being willing to ask those dumb questions to learn quickly. It's coming in and having really read everything, so you know more or less where each people stands, and then just those clarifying questions that are informed. People are much more willing to say, "Oh, this person knows a little bit about what we're trying to do," and I think they're more willing to help at that point. So I think it's a mixture of that preparation, that willing to get outside of your comfort zone, and then being able to sort of see the big picture and piece those things together, I think is also important, because you can get in these coalitions. I think we all know this. You can get so hung up on a tiny thing. And if you don't have the ability to just zoom out and say, great point, let's table that or I'll follow up with you a little bit later on that, you're just going to sit there and it's going to create ill will. And so I think that ability to zoom in, zoom out, and have that big picture in mind is, I know that sounds, again, kind of like a trite thing to say, but it's really important when you have these strong personalities, very smart people. We've got to think big picture. You've got to keep things moving.
It's an important aspect of change management. Yeah. And I ask about the ability to learn and pick things up quickly, because it's a common theme that's emerging through a lot of these conversations, that sustainability, while there's so many differences between sustainability roles across the board, there's also some common threads and similarities. And one of those is that it's such a fast moving field right now. There's always changes, there's always new developments. So if you're a sustainability professional, you have to be able to keep up with those changes and really just be curious, have this curiosity to keep everything and learning, and having humility. You're not, like, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know is I think another common expression, because there's just such a depth to it. And it's so, climate change is so impossibly complex at times, right? And so I think that humility too is really important. I mean, be confident, but that's one thing as well that I don't ever expect. I don't pretend to be an expert. I just try to be a good listener and try to, where I can, pick things up as quickly as I'm able to. Definitely. So could you describe a little bit about what you do at work and kind of your day-to-day work life?
My day-to-day is a lot of external meetings, which I enjoy. This is very similar a little to when I worked in my past positions as well, where it's a lot of meeting with our different partners. Let's say I'm a public-private partnership. It's a lot of meeting with our different growers or the producers that we partner with. So I'd say that's the biggest chunk is meeting with those different partners across our different projects. And then the next biggest is working with my team just on internal coordination and preparation, and developing a strategy for something related to one of those projects. And so it's those. And then, I mean, for where I am in life right now, this really serves me. I wish it could be more, but I've got 2 young kids. And so I would say only about 20% of my time is that travel, getting in the field, going to events. I would love to be in Costa Rica or Colombia or out there on the West Coast, Lou, with some of our partners from our past project. But, I also want to be around. So I want to be around for my kids. So it works out really well. So I would say that's kind of the breakdown for the time being.
That's fair. That's great. And so when you're meeting with these external individuals and internal teams, what kinds of work are you discussing? Like data analysis or planning projects and trying to get new policy written?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's a project right now where we're developing a new tool that growers will use to measure loss whether they're a specialty crop or a row crop or it's a livestock operation. And so that's a lot of meeting to discuss the actual strategy for the tool and where it's project management. Where are things at? What are some of the problems? What are the key things we need to do by this next milestone of when we're going to actually start testing it with a bunch of large companies and their suppliers. So a lot of that is project management. Although, again, what I like about this job versus maybe what I've been in the past, like I felt like when I was in consulting at times, it was very high level. You never got to really go deep on any one thing. You had to be a jack of all trades, which is good early in your career just to get a lot of experience. But I like that then, in addition to the project management and thinking big picture, like I talked about with the policy work, you do then need to go straight down and you need to understand at a very granular level, can this work for a potato producer in, South Africa who has this type of an operation, and what are so we get to very much get in the weeds with that. And then, yes, collecting data, reviewing that once the trials are going, and then using that in a way that you can put together, let's say, a public facing report or case study that isn't. One of the things that I try to take is that we're all so busy. We all read so much. We're inundated. I try to come at that again with that empathy of everyone's busy. Let's put this in a way that you can really quickly understand it and that anyone can understand. This isn't going to be wonky. This isn't going to be, like DC speak, if you will, or anything of that nature. I think it needs to be very accessible because ultimately at the end of the day, you want this to be something that people use and not just sit on a website. So I think that's always the way. And I think, Lou, you probably saw that a little when we were working on our project together. Let's just keep it really simple and really accessible because we want this to be something that actually leads to results.
Definitely. It seems like project management is a certain skill set in terms of managing things at the high level and then dialing in and really understanding the needs of different stakeholders and what would make a project successful.
Yeah.
There's that data collection and analysis component when you're actually proving out a point or proving out an idea, and then preparing those reports and presentations to communicate the results with people who can implement these changes or really make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. All of you. I think knowing how to talk, two other skills that I would highlight. I think knowing how to talk to people where we get into email, you get a lot of back and forth. You can get down those rabbit holes, like I mentioned, on something really technical. You have to be, okay with being uncomfortable and jumping on a phone call or jumping on a Zoom or meeting in person, God forbid, right? It's some of those really basic, like human behaviors that I would really emphasize, because I think when we think about sustainability, I think about the beginning of my career was like, how do I become an expert on like energy efficiency, or how do I become an expert on this new technology, let's say. And I will say that when you're working across so many different types of partners or public and private partners, it's just about being able to sort of not put fires out, but also just be able to find common ground. And that takes just some very basic, like being able to empathize, jumping on a quick call. So I would emphasize that one because it's overlooked. The other one is don't take yourself too seriously. No one likes to be lectured. No one wants to just be browbeat all day and to focus on. I mean, these are enormous challenges. I'm not downplaying them. I'm just saying at the end of the day, like you have to enjoy what you do. So whether it's an external partner or your team, I will also say, like when I was younger, I probably, lectured my parents and others about this is why you can't and no one like that. That's never changed anyone's mind in the history of the world. So I can't emphasize that enough too. Like I think people have to enjoy the interaction as well. So find your own way of doing that, but it's actually very important.
There's such a human component to driving change and being able to. I like what you said about finding common ground. That's really a role that is important to be played, but it needs to be maybe a third party that's coming in and kind of talking and finding where people agree, even if there's points they don't agree on.
Yep, right. Exactly. Don't have to agree on everything, agree on something, right? As they say.
Yeah. So what does success really look like for your role in particular? What are you trying to achieve?
It's too simple to say. We obviously want to have food loss and waste by 2030. That's the SDG 12.3 that we have as a North Star. But for me, just more practically, like I want to shift what is normal or shift what is the status quo in particular markets. Like I want food waste to not be seen as a sunk cost and something you pay to have hauled away or that you then go throw in a hole in the ground or incinerate. Like I want it to be seen as this is actually something valuable that I could have people pay me to then go create new products. If I'm a business, like I want that shift to take place with enough of the larger players oftentimes so that then that has a ripple effect, for better or worse. If, a large retailer decides to make a change in the way that they report and collect data on food loss and waste, that obviously then goes and makes waves down or back up the supply chain rather with suppliers all the way to growers. And so we always try to take that perspective of, well, what does this actually look like and how will this impact those, let's say at the farm level that are so already overburdened and are our whole society depends on being able to eat, right? And so like you need to have that in mind. But at the end of the day, I think about, success being is, can you implement something that can both be adopted by these market movers that can also be feasible and beneficial for the folks that ultimately have to implement it? So complex answer, but that's that momentum, that market shift is something I think about a lot in the work. I think success is also, this goes back to my days as a young lad and as an undergrad is we had Dr. Price was one of our professors that, always emphasized leading from the back of the room. And I think WWF is so big as an NGO that a lot of times it can be seen as if we're taking more than our maybe fair share in terms of whether it's fundraising or different projects. And so I am very sensitive to that just because I come from not anymore, but it used to be a much smaller town, right? And I don't want to forget that the people doing the work are the ones that aren't just there 20% of the time like I am, like they're the ones doing it all day. And so one of the things, this sounds trite, but you really try to do is how do you showcase, how do you amplify a point or a problem or an ask of those folks doing the work with our brand platform, whatever you want to call it, just because we do have that access for better or worse to policymakers or to larger players in the food industry. And so I do truly want to make sure that, like, to me, that is not being up at the front talking about me, WWF, blah, blah, blah. Like I really try to, when we're thinking about whether it's a panel or a speaking event or paper, how are we getting the folks that, again, are doing so much of the hard work on the ground to be front and center and have it be their perspective. So small, right? But to me, like that's, I'm sorry to use another sports analogy. I'm a soccer player, center midfielder. I would much rather have an assist than a goal. So like that is always key to me about like, what does success look like? It's not just about WWF getting their, whatever out there and they're, we're winning this or winning that. It needs to be, as much of a coalition as possible. And then the last thing I'll say, sorry, long answer, is we can do all that great work with a partner on the ground and that partner might get it. Great. They're what % of the market? I don't know. So we have to connect it to policy. And so whether it's our work with schools or it's our work with larger food companies, like we are always trying to keep an eye on this can be used as a demonstration, as evidence, to then hopefully pass something that can kind of drive that systems change. And I truly believe in that.
It's clear you're very passionate about working with those people who are boots on the ground and assisting them with scoring those goals and helping drive change.
Thanks for working with me on that. Yeah.
Yeah. And the goal that you've described for your team is such a worthwhile one, really shifting what's normal in the marketplace and reducing food waste in the markets. And it really helped us understand exactly what your team is working towards. I'm wondering still, how does your role fit into that picture? Are you trying to push policy changes across the line or implement projects or create new tools?
Because my goal or my job is really to manage our overall program in the US. It's about making sure that even our team, because we have some of my teammates work just on hospitality and food service, or work just on schools, or work just on farms. And we're just at kind of that retail level. Is how do you make sure that we are all we all have a common thread. And so a little bit of this is larger, just team project management or strategy development. So that's just ensuring that we're complementing one another, looking for crossover. An example is, we work with the retailers, we work with the farms, and what's really they need in the last couple of years is being able to bridge that across the supply chain and look for those sort of whole chain projects. So that's an example where that's very much one of the things I see as my primary duties. But then, taking that, zooming out one more level, it's policy. So all of those individual things, how do I connect that to, since I'm able to help really lead some of those policy efforts, is some of those larger potential policy vehicles that you have to be opportunistic. You have to look for whether it's a farm bill, a standalone bill, something that happens at the state or the city level. So back to Robert Bonney, who was such a great mentor and professor. One of the things I'll paraphrase that he said is, "I'm for whatever passes," which isn't to say you're willing to settle. It's just that you're looking for progress, even if it's incremental. And so that's very much kind of the way I think about it. Is did we get everything we wanted? Probably not. Probably never. Right. But we're trying to make those systems changes, even if it's incremental.
Definitely. That's very interesting. It seems like there's a high level strategy component, project management aspect where you're trying to figure out how the different things that WWF is working on comes together to achieve a larger goal and push things forward.
Yeah. And I haven't even talked about our 100+ network offices or the different teams again. So it's a lot of, you've got to try to see that big picture piece and how do you support one another? Because I love the people that I work with. And so I want to see them be successful. I want to try to find projects for their work to fit in and overlap with what we're doing. So can't be everywhere at once. You have to be okay with that. You have to leave work at work. But, I'm always trying to think about those puzzle pieces as well.
You also mentioned that you get to zoom in sometimes and really work on their projects, which is great. And it seems kind of rare for a position to have both that high level strategy and be able to zoom in and work on some of the nitty gritties.
That's why I don't think I could let this go. I really do enjoy that. That rejuvenates me, is being able to spend some time in the morning, and whether it's writing or it's getting into the weeds, because I just found, again, back when I was in consulting, there's nothing against that. It's just, I wasn't happy being so high up at the PowerPoint level. I want to be farther down and really understanding it and seeing closer to the actual impact. So, each person has to figure out what drives them. And for me, I like to see big picture. I'm probably best suited for that, but I don't also want to be someone who can't truly understand it. That just makes me feel insincere. So I really need to get down to that level, at least 20% of my time.
Absolutely. That sounds awesome. So are there any specific education requirements or certifications that you've gotten that are either necessary for the job or have significantly helped your progress?
I mean, the Duke degree was very helpful. I won't lie.
That was the master's in environmental management, right?
Yeah. And that's broader type of environmental degree, in that you're getting both like a science background, but it's also much more on the project management side or policy, understanding, sustainability from a business standpoint. And so, it probably fits more with who I am. But I for wanting to work on coalitions and to, talk to all different types of industries and people. But I think it really also gave me specific skills, like I mentioned, on the policy side, where at the very least, what I found was, and I went to school later in life, right? Like I waited 10 years between my undergrad and getting my grad, but being with folks that I could just kind of be a sponge around was really just as invaluable. I mean, I had great connections from the professors, and the ideas that they gave me on like mentorship and advice on next steps, that was invaluable. But hearing from my teammates or my classmates rather, and having that network to ask those dumb questions, I think was also I still use them, right? Like, can you tell me more about da, da, da? And I think that's really helpful. And then the final thing, I mean, this is just a cold stone reality piece. I for a long time wanted to not have to go back and get a brick grad program. They're expensive. They take time. I was able to work, and that helped a little. And go to school, it was hard, but that helped with financially making it work. But I do feel like, at least in the NGO space, for better or worse, I think it is almost something that is the status quo, and it's like a stamp on your passport. And so there's an equity, obviously issue to that. And I'm not saying I'm for that. I'm just, for those listening, I'm just saying that it does feel, as I've tried to informally network with all these different, NGOs I thought about working with, it just felt like most people had it. And so, yeah, I did that. I want to be honest about that. I really tried for the longest time to just, can I do it without one? Because I don't want to go back to school. Although I love going back, I'll be honest. So now I regret having thought that. But anyways, that's my honest take on it. So.
Yeah, no, it's an important perspective, and thanks for sharing that. And so there's a access component to it that got you in the door there. And are there any particular, the network you said was one, but how else has the master's degree helped you as you've worked in your current position?
I will be very blunt too about the access or the network. I think when you think about going to school, you have to think about where you want to ultimately live. I knew we were going to live in this area. And so where does that network dump out really? Like I would love to have gone to school in Europe or South America, but I knew I wasn't going to be living there. And so for me, that also lined up really well with where we were going to be living as a family. So just a small piece, but say that was one thing I learned.
Great.
No, I don't think beyond what I mentioned that there's like a tangible skill set other than just being the latest. Like I was able to get a refresh on the latest science, the latest trends, and then just have an invaluable kind of set of people that I can use as a sounding board. I think it's a lot of money, but I can't tell you how much that builds your confidence and helps you to sort of kind of right size your talking points when you're going out. You're trying to say, I'm trying to pivot, when you're trying to go from something like I did, which wasn't focused on sustainability at all, to something that is, you're knowing that you getting that momentum and that confidence is invaluable as well, that I got through that network and I got through just being around those people and giving presentations and working with them. So that was big for me as a career changer.
Definitely. Well, Alex, everything you've shared with us today is so valuable and so interesting. It sounds like you're really making an impact, and your ability to work on these policy changes and work with a bunch of different stakeholders is really inspiring.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm happy to meet with anyone that has questions after. I had a lot of people that were really kind to me and that made time to allow me to ask all those dumb questions. And so happy to pay that forward and do the same with anyone. So really love that you're doing this, Lou. Thanks for having me, and thanks, for creating this.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Alex. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you.